This plant is Rudbeckia laciniata, and there's quite a bit of it in this park area right here. This particular plant, at least 8 feet tall, it's huge. Most of them are in here. And quite a few pollinators on this plant right now. In the past, I always had a bias against Rudbeckias, probably because of the overuse of the Goldstrum Rudbeckia, which was just a horrible plant all around. And when you get into these native species, they're pretty cool for the most part. This particular plant is like, once it starts flowering, it really attracts the pollinators. A little bit less so once it starts maturing, but this plant right here has got some honeybees on it and other smaller pollinators, little bumblebees. So quite a bit of life in this patch right here. And as you can see, it's quite expansive. What's really nice about this, there's really no buckthorn, honeysuckle, or other invasives that are mixed in here. I think somebody cleaned it out years ago. What we did this year is we came through this area in the back of it, and within this has got rid of the burdock and the Dame's rocket to really give this all some room to grow. You'll see some other stuff, snake root that's popping in here. There's jewelweed. It's another plant. It's starting to wilt. We've had a lot of drought this year, but these plants are still over 6-7 feet tall. Even with the drought, this area here just collects a lot of water. This one's starting to wilt because of the heat. This plant is a cup leaf, it's called. It's pretty rare around here. Very small flowers on it, but it attracts the pollinators very well as well, and it's quite a thug. Just like this, it'll cover some ground. But back to the Rudbeckia, this plant has a lot of common names. I usually go by lance leaf, coneflower, or lance leaf Rudbeckia, but it goes by a number of other names. You can look those up, whatever you call it. Now this is very reliable, obviously, from seed. I've never grown it at all, but as you can see, it spreads once it gets going. There's a monster ragweed in there. So quite a bit of native life in here in this stretch right here. And some other things in here as well. Back there's quite a bit. This area we're hoping to develop a little bit. There's quite a bit of native structure in there. There's not a whole lot of invasives in there, but it would be really nice to get some Joe Pye weed and some boneset and some other larger growing plants back there, just to complement this established native habitat. You can see it's very expansive. It goes way back. What's nice about this plant is that it's rhizomatous rather, and it will cover quite a bit of ground once it gets established. And because I do see this plant sprinkled in park areas around here all over the place, I imagine these seeds are extremely viable given the right conditions. This is really not one for a small garden unless you just want to contain it in a certain area. I could see planting it and just kind of pulling it up here and there every spring just to have a little color and height from this plant. That could be useful, but for conservation purposes, it's like just the thickness of that is nothing's going to grow in there if you let it spread out and thicken out. It's not going to be able to compete. So these plants are very beneficial for choking out invasives. But I was saying, yeah, the pollinators seem to like this plant quite a bit. So if you're ever in the woods and you see this thing, it's definitely a stunning plant when it's planted in mass like this. It's huge. You can see how large it is. And there's another patch over there. There's also some woodland sunflowers mixed in here. However, one thing about this plant is you definitely want to give it some room.